Welcome to blueprint number 4, sexual intimacy. We're going to walk through a few screens. Before we do, it's fundamentally necessary that you understand we're going to play with this one word, intimacy, and you're going to define it differently depending on your sex. If you ask a typical man to define the word intimacy, he will likely say sex. A woman's answer is a little different than that. Years ago, when I used to do marriage seminars around the country some, I always had a form to pass out at the beginning of the seminar. And I would tell the married couples, do not put your name on here. All I had up top was husband or wife. I wanted to know if it was the man or the woman responding. And so I would ask a bunch of leading questions that would kind of guide me over the Friday night. I used to do Friday nights and Saturday morning. And so I would ask leading questions that would guide me in that. One of those simple questions in several of the seminars was simply define intimacy. I can tell you that almost, without exception, men would either say just sex, or they would use the word sex in a couple other words. You know, they might say something like, sex with your wife, but it didn't matter, it was still sex. The typical woman, however, would usually not say sex. Typically a woman would say an emotional connection, a trust, a bonding that comes from trust and from feeling loved and secure, and it doesn't have to result in sex, but if it does, it's the feeling for, well, here's what they actually but you get the idea. So we're just going to abbreviate her response to emotional bonding, and his response will abbreviate to what it was, sex. And I've got them in a circle for a reason, so just hang there for a second, and let me tell you that this circle is the intimacy of your marriage for our model. Every one of us married for intimacy. And the only problem with that is we had a different idea of what intimacy was when we married. So we had different needs that we would plug under that category of intimacy. If you let this circle represent your marriage, it cannot go beyond the bounds. Everything about you, this is going to represent right here. And in your marriage, you have stuff like this. You're married, but you have to deal with your careers, and you have to deal with money and houses and repairs on cars and bills and balancing budgets and how much did she spend and how much can you spend, and vacations and religion and habits and cars and taxes. That ought to be about 3 times that size. And church and political opinions that might differ. My in-laws, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, were diametrically opposed at every election. He was a devout Democrat because he was a longshoreman. He was a business agent for the ILA 24, the Houston Longshoreman Union. And she was a diehard Republican. So they laughed about it. Every time they went to the election polls, they followed each other in, and they knew he was going to pull Democrat and she was going to pull Republican and counter him every single election as long as they could remember back in their marriage. And then when we were joking about it one time, she said, well, it wasn't always easy for us to laugh about it. And then she started telling me that in the first 10 years or so after he became a devout Union man, they had many, many arguments over some of the things that were going on down on the docks. And I said, oh, you mean like the mafia and the mob stuff? And she said, well, kind of like that. And so the only argument my father-in-law and I ever got in was over the Union being corrupt. And I had been reading some research material, and I was in Port Arthur at the time, and they came over for a visit, and I said, talk to me about the Union a little bit. And so we got a discussion. He got hot, he got mad. Only time he ever got irritated, he left. And I said to him, why don't you just admit that y'all are corrupt, that you're in the mob? Why don't you just admit it? And it would be all right. I'm not asking you to change the Union. I'm just telling you, stop lying about it. Admit it. And he got hot and mad, and they left. And he was all right, but he was huffy, and he told him, all right, let's go. And they left. It was so cool. The president, a former president of the Houston Union, was his good friend. I won't call a name because the camera's running, but if you wanted to research it, you could go backtracking and you could find a Houston Chronicle just a few days after my father-in-law had this argument. The Houston Chronicle's headline was, "The name of the Galveston ILA president indicted for connections to the mob." And that was his good friend, used to be his president. So I couldn't resist it. I picked the phone up and called him. And, so even though he and I were not married, we had quite a few little discussions over political opinions after that. And it kind of made him misty-eyed because he remembered the early days of his marriage a few times when they used to fight over it. If this circle represents your marriage, none of the stuff in that circle actually reflects the reason you married. We just said that a while ago. You married for intimacy. That's the heart and soul of your marriage. You didn't marry so you could take vacations with somebody. You didn't marry so you could pay joint taxes. You didn't marry so you could fuss over who should be president or not. You didn't marry so you could argue about church or careers or your kids or anything else. You just married because you needed a connection to someone intimately. You needed to be loved, and you needed to love. The single most common element that hasn't changed in 7,000 years is every one of us want to love and be loved back. And we need it. We crave it. We hunger for it. Which is why we will look over a lot of bad habits just to marry someone that we're convinced is going to finally fulfill me in that need in my soul, my heart. But again, I remind you the problem is that we define it differently. If this is the core of our marriage, if that's the reason we marry, the simple key to making your marriage great is to remember that that's the reason you marry, not this stuff, and then just make that bigger. Follow with me now. It's 8th grade level, I know, but follow with me. If I can just make this circle really, really big, well, then I would have same stuff in marriage, but it wouldn't dominate our conversation and our moods so much. If I could just expand the intimacy, more of the reason we marry each other. We still have to pay taxes, but we don't fight over them. They're not big. None of that stuff matters. If I have little intimacy and I'm unfulfilled all the time, guess what I'm probably going to do? Fuss and gripe about everything. You wonder why he walks out of the house and slams the door and burns rubber backing out of the driveway and he's just going to the corner store. I can tell you why. Because that circle is teeny tiny. And all he can see is the crud out here that's part of your marriage. I got to go to the store again. Can't you remember to get everything you need? And you think, oh, he's such a grouchy man. Yeah, he's grouchy because you're not fulfilling his intimate need. She's complaining all the time. She's nagging and fussing and whining about the stuff you hadn't fixed. It's because that's, you follow me? It's simple, but just play with the idea. I could just expand that. And so the problem is our two definitions. Remember, he thinks this way, she thinks this way. And so if you want to expand your intimacy, the man would just like to say, pretty simple. Pretty simple to expand our intimacy, just give me more sex. But he's trying to expand his half of the circle. And that doesn't affect her heart, her mood, her feelings at all, because that doesn't do anything for her half. So the simple truth is, and she can't look at her husband and say, make me feel secure and safe and loved and make me trust you. You can't. The simple truth is, you as a man cannot expand, demand more intimacy, because that'd be like, I demand more sex, and then I'll be happy. No, you won't. Or she'll say, I got 3 minutes, hurry. And then you're like, accommodation is not love and intimacy. It's just accommodating a need. I don't want it to be an accommodating a need. And she can't say, you've stepped on my feelings, you embarrassed me in front of friends. I don't even feel like you love me sometimes. Oh, well, I got 5 minutes. Let me make you feel like I love you. Let's go to the bedroom. That doesn't work. That's not what she's talking about. And you can't fix that in 5 minutes. You can't even fix that in an hour. You can't fix that in a week. It's going to take you some habit changing and some behavior changing to expand that part of the circle and make her feel trusted and respected and cherished and valued and loved, safe with you. You're going to have to work on that. So that's kind of the way it is. He has to expand her half, and she has to expand his half. That's the only way you can grow intimacy in your marriage. That means that you have to be, if one of you tries it and the other one doesn't, you still get all this big stuff. You understand the reason for the little model? I know it's a little oversimplified, but you get the idea. If the wife says, okay, I get it, I know what he needs, I understand the way he thinks, I'll quit criticizing him because that's the way God made him, and I will please him. And he doesn't reciprocate and realize that you need something different than that from him, and he doesn't try to provide the security, the trust, the loyalty, the love that you need, the emotional bond that you need from him. Well, this is what you've got. He might feel happier, but this stuff is still overpowering and crowding out, and it becomes the dominant thing, and it's nagging, and it's complaining, and it's never quite right. Intimacy has to be mutually understood and mutually achieved. For you to be able to expand that circle, you have to have, both of you have to have the understanding. The wife cannot say, well, I will when he will. That doesn't work, because he can't start today. I mean, he can, but you can't see it. And you can. So that idea of I will if you will doesn't really work in it. You have to just get the understanding that if you're a man, you have to get the understanding that it is my duty to learn how to make my wife know that I love her, that I cherish her, that I'll never cheat on her, that my head won't even turn, that I will not embarrass her ever in front of anybody, that I will respect her feelings and listen to them, that she is safe with me, that when the day comes to an end, she can't wait to come home to be in my company because I will be pleasant, I will have an answer. I don't want, don't answer, this is rhetorical. But if you've been married for a long time, you probably know the feeling of dreading the end of the day when you have to turn your car toward the house. And you dread going home because you know it's going to be tiring. It's going to be exhausting. You're going to have to listen to him vent and vent and vent. You're going to have to listen to her whine and nag. And you reach a place where you think, is there ever any hope for us? And I'm telling you, there is. Because the reason we vent and talk and whine and gripe is because this has shrunk so much in our relationship that that's all we have left to do is just gripe and fuss and talk and bills and kids and problems and school and work and career and everything we're doing. But when you really start trying to rediscover and develop the core that made you marry in the first place, when you try to rediscover what you wanted from each other in the very beginning, and you go back and recreate that, it takes time for a man to recreate trust and loyalty, especially if he's lost it by his behavior. It also takes time for a woman, a wife, to be able to start giving sex to a man without accommodating when she doesn't feel loved first and doesn't feel valued first. So it has to be a mutual commitment from both people to say, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but this is what we've got to do. Let me share the verses with you that actually lay this foundation for a man and a woman. 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, Paul writes, "Now concerning the matters about which you wrote to me, it's good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. Because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband." In King James, that verse says, "Let the husband render to his wife her due benevolence," which is why the ESV changed the language. He should give to his wife her conjugal rights. Now, due benevolence. Just think about the phrase, the language. You are due something in marriage, and it's good. We'll let benevolence be a good word, and we'll let due be something that's owed to you. You got married with the right to expect something from your wife or your husband. The halves of that circle. You men didn't marry a woman, don't lie about it. You can lie to your wife when you get home, but not here. You men didn't marry a woman so she could prop up your feelings and make you feel good at the end of a tired day and rub the back of your neck, and then you go to bed and her stay up and wash dishes and cook all night for tomorrow. You didn't marry her for that. You married her because you wanted to snuggle and hug and cuddle, and because your expression of intimacy is very physical. You're sight motivated, and you're a touchy-feely creature, and you wanted that. And so, you had a right. The woman had a conjugal right. So your due benevolence. And Paul says the wife doesn't have authority over her own body, and the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. He's trying to say you belong to each other. Back to our circle. You don't have authority over your body, sir. She does. She decides whether you're going to be intimate or not. Because the only other option is bad. You go to jail for it if you are married. He decides. The language Paul uses, he doesn't mince words, and it gets better. Watch this. Do not deprive each other. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement, mutual understanding, mutually comprehending, mutually agreeing to work on the expansion of that circle. Come together that you may devote yourselves to prayer, and then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Notice what Paul said in that verse. He didn't say, now you remember there's a lot of temptations out there, and you know the devil's out there looking for you, so you better pray really, really hard and say, God, don't let me fall. This is not about prayer, and he doesn't throw it in here. He says, you better remain intimate with each other, lest Satan tempt you because you don't have enough control to resist what's out there when what's in here is failing. When what's in this marriage is failing, Satan will tempt you, and you will fail because you lack self-control. That's what that verse is saying. Let me sum up those points. The points that Paul just made is that sex outside of marriage is immoral. That's the way he started that first verse. The second one is he said each person had a right to expect certain things in that marriage contract, and it's the duty of the other to provide it. We men cannot excuse ourselves because, well, after all, I'm just a man, and that's the way men talk, and she needs to understand that. That doesn't work. A husband has to learn how to talk the way she wants him to talk. If you want to be happily married, and you want to fulfill her half of that intimacy, you learn to speak spirit-soothing words, complimentary things. You learn to say the things that matter to her, and you learn to say them in a way that doesn't come across like a tacky compliment, but a genuine expression of how you feel about that woman that you're married to. You have to learn how to give her what she had a right to expect. and vice versa. The woman cannot just say, I find it distasteful to try to be intimate with a man who is just not loving me like I should be loved. Well, that's not the way you fulfill your half of the bargain either. He had a right to expect that his need would be met as much as you did. And then number 4, that withholding intimacy from each other actually leads us to temptation. And you can't blame it on God. He warned us. You can blame it on the devil if you want to, lest Satan tempt you. But what it is, Paul said, is a lack of self-control. And the reason that lack of self-control even came up in the first place is because you were not fulfilling each other in the intimate circle. Let's conclude this on that note. That concludes blueprint number 4. And so look for blueprint number 5, family relationships.